Hello, my name is Dwayne Spearman. Welcome to Directional Bible Ministries. This is a teaching ministry that is called to make all men see what is the fellowship of the mystery. Today you'll see a different background. I am traveling. I am in South Haven, Mississippi, and I'll be here for a week. But I still wanted to keep the teaching going. So tonight we're going to go ahead and look at session number 3. So go ahead and open up your Bibles to session number 3, or Daniel chapter number 1. And you'll see I got a little bit of different layout. I'm using Word and Olive Tree Bible moving forward. So Daniel chapter number 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God. You remember we talked about last time there was a little bit of quandary about what happened. Some people think that Nebuchadnezzar got everything and destroyed it, while obviously it says here he only got part. So obviously he got part of it and destroyed it. But what about the part he didn't get, like the Ark of the Covenant? Where is that? There's all kinds of conjecture. Some people think they hid it. Some people think that it was destroyed, but we talked about how it really doesn't matter because it can be rebuilt again according to the instructions given by Moses, during the 7-year tribulation when it's needed. But don't think that's a deal breaker at all. Which he carried into the land of Shinar, which is Babylon, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes. Last week in session 2, verse number 2, we talked about God was allowing the nation of Israel to be punished. Why? Because of idolatry and disobedience. Of course, Jeremiah lays out the idolatry. Jeremiah 25, Jeremiah 29. They were idolatrous. They were worshiping other gods. So God allowed them to be carried away. And we'll get down later. We'll start talking about the disobedience part, other than idolatry, in that they did not allow the land to rest. And we'll talk about that as we get further along. So today we're going to get into session number 3. What we're looking at here, looking 3 and 4. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, master of the eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princesses, children in whom was no blemish, well favored, skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, as such had the ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And of course, Chaldea is Babylon. Chaldeans are Babylonians. We talked about the other day that these kingdoms are still here. Babylon is modern-day Iraq. Persia is modern-day Iran. And of course, Assyria is Syria. Jordan's still there, Egypt's still there. All these countries are still there. They just might have a different name, but they're still in that geographical region. So what we're seeing here is a prophecy, fulfilled prophecy, because in Isaiah chapter number 39, so check this out. Look over in Isaiah chapter number 39 and verse number 1. Isaiah prophesied, at that time, Merodach-Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present to Hezekiah, for he had heard that he had been sick and was recovered. Remember, Hezekiah was wanting to die, and he turned his head to the wall, and he wept, and the Lord, put the sundial back and gave him some more years of life. And what did Hezekiah do with it? He blew it. He brought Babylon in, and Hezekiah was glad of them, and he showed them the house of his precious things, the silver and the gold and the spices and the precious ointment and all the house of his armor and all that was found in his treasures. There was nothing in his house nor in his dominion that Hezekiah showed them not. And then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah and said unto him, What said these men, and from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are come from a far country unto me, even from Babylon. Then he said, What have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, All that is in mine house have they seen. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. Then said Isaiah to Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord of hosts. Behold, the days come, that all that is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store until this day, shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shalt they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of Babylon. So Isaiah prophesied that this would happen, and it did. And of course, those who were selected were Daniel and his 3 friends. It was customary. It was a customary practice for Babylon to take some of those from a conquered nation and train them to be ambassadors to that same nation. I mean, think about it. It makes sense. Since they already knew the language, they already knew the religion, they already knew the customs. I mean, it was just easier. You know, I think of the modern day missionary movement. For years, we would take the white man and we would send him to a foreign country. He would spend years trying to figure out the language. He would spend years trying to figure out the customs and the religion and how to communicate the gospel. Why not just use a local? Why not just use a native? Why not send, the missionary in to train up a local and let them do that? And I think the modern missionary movement has figured that out. Now look in verse number 5. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. So here we're looking at a 3-year re-education that these princes that were carried away into Babylon were going to have to go through in order to be these representatives for the nation of Babylon. So these young men were to be re-educated before being brought before the king of Babylon for his approval. And understanding that the schooling of these 3 young Hebrews, of course we're talking about Mishael, Hananiah, and Azariah, and they were friends of Daniel. And of course they were renamed Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the schooling for these 3 Hebrews was completely pagan in nature. It sounds a lot like the public school system of our day. I quoted, who was it, Martin Luther, who said that education without God is the pathway to hell. And that's pretty much where we are today. We have absolutely thrown God out of everything, and we're wondering why the education system in our country is absolutely falling apart. The fear of the Lord is knowledge, or the knowledge of the Lord. No, the fear of the Lord is knowledge. Is that the verse from Proverbs? If you don't fear God, then what are you going to learn? You're going to learn pagan ways. You're going to learn ways that are not God's ways, and it's going to lead to idolatry. It's going to lead to disobedience. It's going to lead to, God not putting his hand on anything that you do because you have turned your back on him through your education system. And of course we have completely done that today. And I take my hat off to the public school teachers who are trying to stay true for their faith. But quite frankly, and again, I work in the field of education. I know of whom I speak here, of what I speak. It's a losing battle. Okay. I really do not know how much longer Christians are going to be able to work in that arena without totally having to compromise their faith. I mean, they have already been backed into a corner where they can only talk about their faith if it's addressed by the student. It's a question by the student. Certainly the curriculum has absolutely thrown God out. The whole Darby or Scopes trial about, let evolution be taught alongside of creationism. And of course, they let them do that. But now evolution has been completely bought into, and creationism has been completely kicked out of our public school classrooms. And, as a result, our kids are not being taught the alternatives. And realistically, evolution is a religion because you didn't see it. You're taking it completely by faith. You wasn't there, just like I wasn't there. I wasn't there when God said, "Let there be light." I wasn't there when God created Adam and Eve and the plants and the animals and the sea and the stars. I wasn't there. I accept it by faith just like you accept it by faith. You wasn't there, okay? It's a religion. Humanism. Man is the center of the universe. That's humanistic thought that came out of the Renaissance and has led us to where we are today. So, again, I just don't think that Christians are going to be allowed in that arena. Certainly, they have been, they'll say, "Well, I'll be a witness through my life." Yeah, you can be a witness through your life. They can watch Mr. Spearman and how he conducts himself in the classroom, but the gospel is spread by, how shall they hear if no one is sent? Eventually you're going to have to open your mouth and share the gospel with these kids, and you're not allowed to do that. So again, the only way, I think eventually it's just going to get worse and worse. It's not like it's going to get better. Eventually there's going to be no room at the public secular level of education, K through PhD, for Christianity and a place to share your faith. And you're going to have to compromise to stay in that arena, and sadly many already have. Now, notice in verse number 6, "Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names. And he gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah Shadrach, and to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego." Now, interestingly, all four of these young men were from the tribe of Judah, and their names were changed to pagan Babylonian names. Daniel in Hebrew means God is judge, while Belshazzar in Chaldean means Bel's prince. Hananiah in Hebrew means beloved of the Lord, while Shadrach in Chaldean means illumined by the sun. Mishael in Hebrew means who is as God, while Meshach in Chaldean means who is like Shach. Azariah in Hebrew means the Lord is my help, while Abednego means the servant of Nego. So again, these children, that were being paganized is what they were being. They were being absolutely paganized. The education that they were going through was paganization. And that's exactly Voddie Baucham. We were talking about him today. He passed away, unfortunately, at a very young age. But he's out of Texas, and he was in Africa at Zambian seminary or something like that, and he was getting ready to transition back to the United States, and he died very early. Voddie Baucham Ministries, and I remember him saying years ago, He said, if you give your children to Caesar, do not be surprised when they come back home as Romans. That's your doing. If you hand your children over to the state, don't be shocked when they come back home as products of the state. And that's what's happening. And unfortunately, just so many families, we have created an environment in the United States as a result of feminism, as a result of, I think feminism is the stem of all of it. But now you got mom and dad working outside the home. The kids go to school, they go to sports, they go to after school activities. They get back home 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. Hopefully they'll eat with their family, but most of them are staring at a phone, and then they go to bed. So, families are not feeding in. Parents are not really raising their children. Teachers are raising your children. I mean, the one they spend the most time with, that's the one that's raising them, not you. I mean, if you want to counterbalance that, you're going to have to really invest time into your children to deprogram what's being fed to them at your expense with your tax dollars every day. And you're going to try to reprogram 8 hours of indoctrination with, a couple hours food around the table, Sunday school and Sunday morning. I mean, it's a losing battle. I mean, the strongest dog is the one that gets fed the most. And if you're feeding the flesh through humanism, that kind of indoctrination, then, don't be surprised, when they come home and, they're Romans. I mean, that is what it was designed to do. And it's very effective. Now notice verse number 8. I don't know how much time I got here. I got a few more minutes. Verse number 8, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now eunuchs, they had been castrated so that they could be around the women in the king's court to make sure that, nothing happened. And of course, Daniel and his 3 friends were being trained to be eunuchs. And we're not talking about spiritual eunuchs here either. We're talking about physical eunuchs. They were made eunuchs, okay? So Daniel purposed in his heart he wasn't going to defile himself by eating the king's meat. Why? Because it had been sacrificed to idols. Daniel at this time was about 15 years old. Okay, and at 15 years old, he was determined to live a life of purity and commitment to God. That didn't happen as a result of the state. That happened as a result of Daniel being raised right. The time to say no is before the temptation comes, not when the temptation comes. Daniel had already purposed in his heart, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to live a life of purity, and commitment to God. And again, the time to make that decision is before the decision needs to be made. Again, Daniel was just a kid. And think about his 3 friends, Mishael, Hananiah, and Azariah. They were just teenage boys. Now again, in our country, we have invented the teenager. Well, historically, there is no teenager, okay? A boy turns 13, 14 years old. He's a man, okay? He goes in the military. He gets an occupation. He begins, to serve his country. The whole idea of a teenager is very American, where we take and we cocoon our children when between 13 and 18. Then now we cocoon them all the way until they're like 22 and they're in college. But understand, in most cultures around the world historically, that didn't happen. Daniel's a man. He's 15 years old here. He's a young man, but he's still a man. Okay. We just have the teenager thing, and we've just perpetuated adolescence, if you will, in the United States. And of course, we're reaping it. We've got kids sitting around 23, 24 years old, gaming and sitting in their parents' basement, and they don't have a clue what they're going to do with their lives. Our culture, our society has bred that, and we're the results of that. They don't grow up, to me, I think the only people, this may be controversial, but I don't think you should vote until you're probably 25 years old. And I would push it to 30, to be honest with you. Because our young adults are so ignorant. They have no common sense, like a 15-year-old would in Daniel's day, or a 20-year-old would have been 20 years, 30 years ago. It's not the same thing. Only exception be those serving in the military. You serve in the military, you have every right to vote. When you you turn 18 years old enough to join the military. But otherwise, if it was up to me, I'd raise the voting age to about 30 years old, to be honest with you. Children today are just not as mature and they don't have the common sense or the life experience that's necessary. And I think that's why we're getting all these stupid elections, and socialists and communists are starting to win. It's because of the younger population. It's not because of the older ones. And I could get off the rails on that one for a very long time and probably make a lot of people mad. But, this is an awesome thought that Daniel would do this. It's been said, if a man is wretched, vile, and defiled on the outside, it is first because he is that on the inside. Daniel wasn't that. Daniel was pure. He was holy, committed to God on the inside, and that manifested itself on the outside. If a man is godly and holy and righteous on the outside, it is also first began inside. Out of the mouth, the heart speaketh, is what the Bible says. Okay? In the end, Daniel was godly, he was holy, and he was righteous, inside and out. Good treasure of the heart. Jesus spoke about this in Matthew 12, verse 34 and 35. And he said, O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good things, but an evil man out of the treasure of his heart bringeth forth evil things. Okay? Just can you imagine for a moment the pressure that was on Daniel to conform, not transform, but to conform, to take on the image of the culture in which he found himself at this time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that next time. But everything that the Babylonians did by renaming him, by forcing them to eat of the king's diet, by forcing them to learn the Babylonian language, were all a systematic method of breaking their commitment to God and making them loyal to Babylon and its gods. It was a pressure to conform, but we're not Romans 12:1, therefore I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you be transformed by the renewing of your mind, not conform, taking on the shape of the world, but transform, meaning going against the world. That's what we have been called to do. And of course, the pressure is constant. It's on us all the time. Think about your job, your school, your church. The world wants me to conform, to take its shape. But we as believers in Christ must resist that temptation. Though it's great, and it sometimes comes with a cost, we are to resist that. And then right there's the verse, Romans 12:1 and 2. That you may prove what is that good and that acceptable and that perfect will of God for your life. Because the world wants you to look like them, talk like them, walk like them. And if you do any of those things differently, they're going to label you. If you don't believe that, walk into an elementary classroom and check out the one kid that's different. And as you get older, when you're young, it's physical attributes. It's red hair like I got, or, a kid with a cowlick. Anybody that's different, his skin color, the way he talks, but as you get older, it's based on how you think and what you say and what you believe. The world repels different, okay? It attracts like. It's just the way it is. And we are social creatures. We want to conform, not transform. So anyway, I think that's it for this evening, but God bless you guys. Hope you have a great evening. And remember, I'm posting these things all over the place. They go up on YouTube, they go up on Rumble. If you go to my website, DwayneSpearman.org, you can see all of the platforms that it goes to, either in video and audio, but you can check these things out, share them with your friends. But I appreciate you guys. God bless you. Have a great evening. See you next time.